Our next speaker is Dr. Jeff Toogood, who many of you probably heard of. He's a cardiologist as well as a Beyond Blue ambassador and very vocal advocate of physician mental health and wellbeing. He's the founder of Crazy Socks for Docs, and he's also an avid swimmer. Has done a relay through the English Channel, correct? And that just recently established a swimming event as well to raise awareness around suicide prevention. So welcome, Dr. Jeff.
Thank you. I have no slides, okay. Nor will I get you to use butcher's paper, post-it notes, we won't workshop it. So I don't talk with any slides. Thank you for asking me to talk. I'm glad I didn't do a PhD after listening to that, gee. So I'm here to share my story. The sort of thing was physician wellness, but I think I might just go back to my story. I'm not going to talk to you about yoga. I'm not going to say that you're not resilient, okay? They're words I don't like. So how do you get to this kind of stage and why is it important? I can tell you why it's important. There's two reasons important. If the administrators were here, they would realise that the mental health and the well-being of the workers is important. Why? Because it's cost saving. For every $1 you invest in mental health of your worker, you get $2.30 back. In England, when they did the study, £1, £2.30. If you look at hospitals that start to have high complication rates and more issues and more sentinel events, the mental health and well-being of the workers is poor and there's more bullying. Okay. Now, I thought we're kind of getting somewhere with this, and then I'll kind of share the story. A friend of mine who's actually in Sydney, or someone that was working, who I knew moved up to Sydney to work as an advanced trainee and sort of researcher, texted me and said, and I think Sydney may be slightly different here, but I don't know. I wonder why it took 3 suicides in our hospital, in our department, for the hospital to do something, which is kind of sad. So we kind of know from Beyond Blue data, and we know from other data that we're at increased risk. We're certainly increased risk when we go from being a medical student to an intern, when we're doing our advanced training and exams, because they're pressure point, and also when we go out as a junior consultant. They're pressure points. For me, my first major issue really probably was when I was sitting here and went out as a junior consultant for a variety of reasons. Up to then and prior to then, I've been kind of okay, but I probably did suffer at some stage from what we would now call burnout towards the end of my registrar career. Wasn't described then, but I had all the kind of symptoms. But I didn't kind of fall over and fall down then. Now, why do I share my story? Well, I share my story because I don't want someone to go through what I went through. I want to normalise the conversation about mental health and break down the sort of stigma that exists in our profession and the discrimination that exists in our profession, unfortunately. Now, so standing here, like 1 week ago, I gave a talk then, general meeting at Warrnambool Hospital, where I'm on a board. I gave the talk to the AGM. And I said, I'm a board member of this hospital. I've had a mental health issue, but I think it requires leadership from boards around the country and hospitals, but also boards around the country and general workplaces to embrace the mental well-being of health workers. I'm happy to stand up and say that as a board member down there. But I've recovered to come back. Now, I'll go through the T-shirt in a minute, like towards the end, which is my Crazy Socks. Limited edition of 1, I'm road testing it. No, I've got 2 actually. I've got 2. One of my daughters has got it, so we're road testing, washing to see if it'll survive before we roll it out. But I came very close to taking my own life, about as close as one could be. I'd written a note, and as I've said before, being a type A doctor, I re-edited it because I wasn't happy with the first draft. And I kind of, you can't die with a crappy note and grammar all out. But when I look at it, I don't look at that often. I don't know why I found it, but I found it for an Insight show and sent it to them. And I didn't realise how deeply unwell I was at that time. Now, why do we take so long to get help, I wonder, as doctors? And I sort of kind of think back and drill back on that. For me, some of it was because I'm a bloke. And blokes don't admit their mental health issues. They're meant to be strong and, we can't kind of admit our vulnerability. But the other is this sort of self-inflicted thing we do as doctors. We fail to admit our own vulnerability in a very, difficult and competitive work environment. You also have to remember that it's not just medicine that may cause our mental health issues. If 1 in 10 or 1 in 5 over a period of life will suffer a mental health issue that's enough to require medication, say, it's likely we're going to do it. Some of us are going to suffer that from anyway. But we're already in an environment that's very not conducive to mental well-being. It's very competitive. It's very performance-driven. And there's an increasing pressure on us as doctors from social media, from performance financially, and from performance with regard to errors. So it's no wonder if you're a little bit vulnerable, you're going to be in a bit of trouble. Now, I don't know if you probably know the symptoms of depression, but the ones that hit me were things like, I was suicidal, so it was it's a giveaway. And interestingly at that time, not many of my colleagues reached out. One very old senior administrator and a senior anaesthetist I was doing cases with, because I'm a electrophysiologist by trade, were the people that reached out. But the other couple that reached out were personal assistants at the hospital who are my friends. And one sent me a text when I was away, which said, I'm worried about you. Here's the Beyond Blue number and here's the Lifeline number. I think you might need to call them. It's kind of a wake-up call. And she was kind of right. I was pretty unwell at that stage. But that was kind of the jolt to actually do something. And one of the things I kind of had realised, I was delaying, I realised then, I heard a talk yesterday at the Women's as well, where there was a death of a young trainee, and Mervyn Kane's daughter, who died, spoke. But a footballer spoke, and he also had gone through some issues, and he placed his career first. And I realised I was placing my career first, thinking, how could I take time off? How could I leave my patients? How could I do this? I was realising that I was ill and that I needed to get help, and I was more than a doctor. Had to realise that I had to survive at that stage for my children. I didn't care then when I was going to be a doctor anymore at that stage. So all I was. I'm back to being a doctor, but that's okay. And so that was one of the things. So I was suicidal. I couldn't sleep. And there's two types of things really with depression. Either you don't sleep, and I didn't sleep, or people sleep all the time and can't get out of bed. I had no ambition for the future, and I was withdrawing particularly from things I normally did, such as swimming, such as going to the football. Maybe at that time, because I was following Richmond, that was a good decision. More recently, it would probably not be such a bad decision. It would be a bad decision because we actually win. On the resilience side, that's how I built my resilience. Saturday after Saturday, watching us getting flogged. But anyway, I wasn't eating properly, and I'd pretty much lost interest in medicines. It's not an easy situation. And I can remember sitting in the general practitioner, ringing up to get an appointment with a general practitioner. I kind of cheated to get in earlier other than a week by saying I need to speak to the GP about a patient. And then I said, the patient's me, and I need to come in soon. So, and I went in there. But as a doctor, that's very difficult because you can be sitting there and there can be patients that you know. So there's that privacy issue as well. And I remember bursting into tears when I saw her pleading for help. And then I still argued about taking time off that afternoon and taking this other sort of stuff. Now, how long have I got? A little bit longer. Yeah, sorry. So for me, I'd actually got to that stage, but I kind of had to break through the fear of what was going to happen to my career. I had these concerns about privacy, and somewhat sadly, you know, some of that was broken at the time by people, which I don't like, but I'll come and talk to that in a minute. I also worried what patients would think, well, I'd lose all my patients. But in fact, very few patients have gone from me. And in fact, now, because I do a bit more media, they always want to look at my socks and they always want to know how I am. And I think the thing is, patients want a vulnerable doctor. And they kind of chat to me about a lot of things other than cardiac conditions, which is kind of cool. The discrimination has, I still will say this, has not come from patients, but it's come from my colleagues. That's a problem. And one of the things we need to do to embrace our wellness in this area is we need to stop the discrimination against mental health in general, because that's what we do as a profession in some ways, and then treat our others respectfully. No one would go up to the footballer that spoke yesterday, took a couple of weeks off, who was involved in the supplements issue at Essendon, and tell him he's not mentally tough. Let me tell you, he's about this big. But he did that, and what does the football club do? They embrace it with psychological counselling, and they get him back to play, which we don't have. And Merv Kane said yesterday, do you think we should have wellness teams for hospitals like we do at football clubs? I said, well, I think we perhaps need areas to manage our health. Now, where do we need to go? It's good that you guys are advocating. As I said, when I give talks, 95% of my talks are to medical students, junior doctors and junior trainees. Very few to senior consultants. So that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to change, get the senior consultants involved, because if we need to be well as well. And sometimes, you know, not the bullying, but the sort of inappropriate behaviour from consultants to you or anger may not be that they're just arseholes, it may be that the case, but they may not be well either. Now, what do I think we need? We certainly need the safe place for care. This footballer yesterday got confidential treatment outside the club, which the club arranged, and no one in the club knew until it was time that he was getting some treatment. And so for doctors, we need the safe place. When I initially saw my psychologist, which is not one I see at the moment, her rooms were right next door to a group of 10 cardiologists, all of whom I knew. So she kindly arranged for me to see her right at the end of the day when she knew everyone had gone. Because at that stage I felt a failure and a weakness in that values, you know, this kind of invincibility. We also need the time to get care. You know, having a significant mental health problem may require a few months off work, may require some part-time work, may require you coming back where you don't do night duty on call for a little while. But you can get back with that, and it can be managed. Because you've got to kind of see a severe depressive episode, anxiety episode, as something that is like a significant physical illness. And will take a few months to recover. And you also need the supports, and the supports, the people around you within the institution, but also the supports outside that you need to garnish. And we need this kind of support where we can backfill at times and replace the injured sort of doctor. I don't want to talk too much more other than to say that, you know, people would argue, if I was a director of a department, I'm not now, but I wouldn't take any adverse effect against anyone that had a mental health issue. If they responded and recovered and were well, as you know, you need to do the job. But I would see them, I would know they're resilient. I would know they could deal with problems. I know that they're strong. But unfortunately, for workplace issues and things at the moment, we still discriminate against people. And I'm sure if anyone here would not put on their CV or not tell people they've had a mental health issue. And it was when I was speaking with Andy Tagg a week or so ago, is at the Western, we reckon there's less than 6 or 7 doctors in the country that are prepared to get up and speak like this because they're scared. You don't have to, but speak like this. The benefit from, now I'll go through the socks. The reason I have the socks, of course, are because of the socks. I bought a dog. The dog is the co-founder, and he ate my socks to cause the deal. The colours are because you can be on the red or green zone where you're kind of well. You also can be in the red zone when you're kind of not feeling so well. It's to kind of let you know. Kind of heading towards this myself this way because I've given, since the start of Mental Health Week, about 20 talks. So I'm kind of a little bit vicariously burnt out a little, but sort of, so I'm heading towards that. And you can see that that makes a face with a stethoscope, that makes a face, and they're looking to each other for support. And it's to kind of remind that no health professional doctor should walk alone. It's also remind the administrators that they need to walk the talk in this. I have to go to a football story, but that's just kind of the thing. But the higher performing organisations now are going to embrace the vulnerability in their leadership. And we're going to move, hopefully, from this data-driven, fiscal-driven situation to looking after the staff. And that's how we're going to get the higher performing organisations. If you look at football clubs, and the reason I do that, because it's kind of glaringly obvious. The club I support went from 13th to 1st in a year by the leaders embracing their vulnerability, by the embracing mindfulness, by having positive review process rather than abusive review processes. They changed a whole lot around, and look what they did. It went from 13th to 1st in a very macho culture where the president was a woman, which I'm not saying that in a bad way, I'm just saying he came from America. So you can make changes to push against this trend. I might then end there. I'm happy to take some talks, some questions, not talks.
Awesome. So with the political pressure for the administration and through the hospitals, there's no real incentive from their perspective to care for their KPIs and things. Do you think, how can we address that for mental health and the wellbeing?
I'm not sure. I think you kind of need a mental health KPI or mental wellbeing KPI, but then it'd get gamed, and so I don't know if it'd work. But when VHIA go in and when others look, Victorian Health Insurance Association, and they look at hospitals where there's a number of sentinel events, the bullying and culture and wellbeing of the staff is poorer by a long way. And I've just forgotten who wrote it. There's an article in the Sydney Morning Herald today or yesterday by the head of the quality. I've just forgotten, but it's an article that kind of addresses and says this very thing, that it's kind of in the back of the kind of hospital they opened in, Northern Sydney with sort of like the Yes Minister with no, great hospital, but you can't take patients because they haven't got staff or drugs or bandages or all that sort of stuff. But I don't know, but I think there has to be some measure now of well-being of staff, and every organisation that does it does well. So if we're delivering, the reason we need to be well is not just for us, it's to deliver care for patients and be safe. Looking for other questions, or everyone's usually shy when I give one of these talks. They don't want to ask.
Like, I'm sure after you give these sorts of talks, you'll have lots of people come up to you
Yes.
afterwards and start sharing personal stories.
Yes.
And I guess my question is twofold. One is, what do you do with those? And the second is, I'm sure that takes a toll on you as well, just
Yes.
hearing all of that.
Yes.
And then what do you do for yourself?
I'm giving one more talk this year, next week, and then I'm not going to give any talks for a while. I was going to have a break. I realise that that's the case. So sometimes I've booked a psychology appointment after a lot of talks. I'll probably go for a swim after I vote on the way today. And the others, a lot are pretty well that share their story, but they'll come up and I've given talks where people I've known have come up to me and I've not known, and they go, "Oh, you didn't realise I was away for a month and I was in a psych hospital and yada 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 yada." So it's kind of, people are they don't have to share it openly, but I think if you look at the difference between professional sport, where Moses Enriques gets a pretty much, straw in the 7:30 report and everyone says he's fantastic, but, doctors would be pillared, and if someone took on Moses on the field with sledging, although us Australians we kind of can't, set the ground rule, but I'm sure that they would they would go back at the people that are sledging him for that. So we kind of haven't changed the culture in medicine. There's still stigma significantly, and it's a busy job. It's a hard job. And it's a 40-year job of being busy and tough and hard. We've got to realise that that's the case. And some of the people externally that seem really well, and they go, "Oh, I'm coping," they're maybe on their third or fourth partner, and do all these things that you don't realise are self-destructive that are behind the scenes, but paint this vision, and they may say they're well, but they're actually not well. So I kind of try and look after myself. These talks are kind of demanding and you get vicarious type of, not so much from you, but you're kind of sharing the stories and all that sort of stuff. And people will tag you into other stories around the country.
Thank you.
How much role do you think mandatory reporting plays in all of this?
Look, I think it depends. If it's used correctly, mandatory reporting is probably not an issue if it's clearly the doctor is at risk and causing problems, but I think that's not the case. I think it poses a significant problem. I think any doctor that's investigated at any level, whether it's, within the hospital where they review a case or a patient complaint, or then it gets to the next level, increases that doctor's suicide risk. And in the GMC, that a cluster of deaths, suicides, in the UK, that a cluster of suicides, and that increased cluster were doctors being investigated by the GMC by complaints. And so I think it has it does play a part, hence our, I'm one of the advocates to a Western Australian model, which all the states are kind of vacillating back and forth about. I don't think it helps, and I don't think the current way that the board, the medical board runs stuff, for any investigations kind of right. They kind of missed the point. mind saying that. It's kind of inhuman in a way.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susie. I think one of the sentences you said that really stood out for me was that patients want a vulnerable doctor. That's something I'm definitely going to go away and think about. And please let us know when we can order